Revelation chapter 17. As we concluded last week, we looked at the end of the tribulation. It is, for all intents and purposes of our study through the book of Revelation, it's done. It is over. The judgments are concluded, though we will go back and look at the final judgment, which includes the return of Jesus Christ. We'll look at that when we get to Revelation 19, but we're done. The remaining chapters, 17, 18, 19, 20, really get into a review, if you will, of some of what has been going on. Chapter 17 deals with the religious or ecclesiastical, if you want to look at it that way, but the religious system of the end times. That is what we're going to cover first this evening, and that's the main focus of chapter 17, though we'll get into a little bit of the political system. But it's the downfall. Revelation 17 is the downfall of the end times religion. Chapter 18, which is what, Lord willing, we'll discuss next week, is the political, the social, the commercial, the economic system of the end times. And we'll look at the downfall of that next week. So tonight and next week, two downfalls. One religion, one religious, and one political. That's how chapters 17 and 18 are divided and broken up. It's interesting, in our country, our founding fathers knew that in order for any people to be truly free, there had to be a freedom of speech, a freedom of religion. We have been given the First Amendment on purpose, and it is no coincidence that that is being attacked extremely heavily. And I don't know if this was our founding fathers or this is others, but the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is in part to protect the First Amendment. And they work hand in hand. But what's even more interesting about our founding fathers is their biblical knowledge, their understanding of the Word of God, and they followed God's pattern by giving us religious freedom, freedom of speech. They followed God's pattern in the Bible to keep a separation of church and state. Now, I know that that has been twisted massively. When Jefferson wrote that to the Danbury Baptists, it meant something completely different than what our courts have twisted it to be today. But there is a reality that every single time that a religion controls the government, there are problems. And every single time the government controls religion, there is problems. They are two separate and distinct entities that are to work together for the good of all people. That is the purpose of it. What we have in the end times is a one world religion and a one world government that have put themselves together in what I'm referring to as a marriage, the marriage of religion and government, like nothing we've ever seen before. So as we read chapter 17, I have to lay some of the groundwork for you. As we read chapter 17, it's full of symbolism. It is complete with, what in the world am I reading? I originally titled this message, and I'm thankful I changed it just because I have teenagers here, not that it's rated R or anything, and you'll see why I titled it as we read it, but I originally titled it The Great Whore and the Beast. And that is exactly what God refers to them as, but I changed it even today. Actually, the other day I changed it because I was reading it and just felt God wanted it something different. So the marriage of religion and government. Let's read chapter 17 together, and we're going to get into it tonight. The Bible says, "And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, and I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of the life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he said unto me, The waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. A lot of symbolism. Yeah. A lot of what in the world did I just read? And so I am going to go through it with you tonight. What I want you to do is, please, if you have a question, write it down, because I want you to ask it at the end. Again, we are dealing with the downfall of, that's the ultimate purpose of it, the downfall of the religious system of the end times. But to get us there, God begins to help us understand how she even rose to power, how this apostate church, if you want to call it that, but just the religious system of the end days, how she came to power, and ultimately how she lost that power and the end state of her. There's 3 aspects of this breakdown that God gives us. The first is found in verses 1 through 6. I've titled this, The Babylonian Mother. And I use that because that's the wording that God uses. Look at the name of her again in verse 5. Upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. And so I got that just directly from the passage, and I'll explain it here in a minute, but she is known as the mother of harlots, this Babylonian mother. The her that is being referenced is the religious system of the end times. So make sure you've got that in your mind. Though John, through God, is seeing a woman riding a beast, the woman is identified as the false religion of the end times. God uses the imagery of a woman specifically concerning religion throughout the Bible. You and I as the church are known as the what? The bride of Christ, and Jesus is our bridegroom. So we as the church are identified as a female. Israel in the Bible is actually pictured as a woman as well. God, the Father, or just God as the male, married Israel, okay, the woman. So the devil's counterfeit, apostate church, the religion of the end times, is also pictured as a woman, but God, instead of saying the bride of Christ, God is not even saying the bride of the Antichrist. God is saying, you're a whore. Trying not to be too blunt tonight, but that's the wording that God uses, okay? And that's how God is describing her. So this mother that is identified, this whore that is identified, is the religious organization of the tribulation period. We're looking at the mother. So God reveals in verses 1 through 3 that of her power, or the mother's power. Look at how it's described in verses 1 and 2. We find her scope of influence in verse 1. Come hither, the end of it. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. That last phrase, many waters, reveals the scope of her influence. Jump down to verse 15. God explains what those many waters are. The waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So it is the nations of the world, and God describes it in a way to help us understand. It's all peoples. It's all multitudes. It's all the nations. It's all languages, the word tongues there. It's all languages. Not that 100% of them are there, but that is the picture that we're getting. This religious system is what you have potentially heard a one world religion. The world comes to her. The nations, the governmental systems come to her, unite with her in her power. So her power is massive. The scope of her influence is truly worldwide, but you see in verses 2 and 3 that it is a very unholy union. With whom, so this whore, with whom the kings of the earth, and this is what God describes it as, they've committed or have committed fornication. They've been made drunk with the wine, again, of her fornication. This is a powerful negative statement from God, saying, yes, this religious system has massive power, but it's an unholy union. The power is coming from all of these kingdoms, all of these nations that say, okay, this is going to be the religious system for all of our people. If you are going to worship, if you are going to go to church, if you are going to, and I use the word church loosely, but if you are going to go to your religious system, it will be ours. There will be no others. Throughout history, there have been religions that have done exactly that. I believe because Satan never knows when Jesus is returning. So he is always trying to do this. You go back to even before the before the Dark Ages, it was Catholicism. But even in the Dark Ages, with the Crusades, you had two competing religious systems trying to dominate all nations, Catholicism and Islam. Even today, you have those same competing religions. But it's not just been them. Other countries have chosen other religions to be the state religions. In Great Britain, it was the Church of England after Catholicism, because the king wanted to get rid of Catholicism, but regardless, it was the Church of England. You had preachers like John Bunyan who were arrested and put into prison because he refused to submit himself to the Church of England's requirements to get a license because they were going to control him. Even in America, we have imprisoned, really before we were a nation, but even in our country's history, we imprisoned people because, what do you think the state religion was of Maryland when it was originally a colony? Catholicism. It's Mary's land. Pennsylvania. What was that one? The Quakers, thank you. Yes. So you had different governments saying, this is who we are. Now the joy with us, even in the colonies, was you could leave and go to another one. Whereas in other countries, that would not have been the case. Okay? But we've even imprisoned people in our history because of religious fighting and religious problems. It's what you have here. It's an unholy union, how she gains her power. Verse 3, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. So here's the power that she has. Full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So ultimately, it is the Antichrist that is giving her the ability to move, to go forth into the world. Hence why she is sitting upon the beast. She is riding his coattails, if you will. Just curious, if we were to translate the word beast, and it's not a horse, okay, but if we were to translate the horse for the beast, if you had no gun, if you had no weapon, if you had nothing else, who's going to win in a fight, you or the horse? That horse is going to win. A lot more power in that horse. Okay, if you don't have a rope to try to tie it down, and even if you dare tie it down and she started bucking and running, you're done, right? Okay, we understand those truths. So here, the beast is really the power behind the false religion. The Antichrist is behind the false religion. But when we refer to the beast, we need to be careful, and I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but we need to be careful because the beast is identified not only as the Antichrist, but also as the economic system of the Antichrist. They're two separate things, but yet interwoven together, where context will tell you what they're talking about. The beast here is the economic system. It's not just the Antichrist, it's the economic system of it. However, it's his system. And so it is him, but it's not just that she's riding him as the leader. She is riding the economic system that he has put into place. And we'll see that as we get into the description of the beast a little bit tonight. But it is the Antichrist that is this beast. We know that from Revelation 13:1. And it says, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So God here in Revelation 17 verse 3 helps us understand, okay, the beast we're talking about is the same beast we've seen already in Revelation 13 to help us understand that. So this woman, the false religion, is going to be to the Antichrist and his system what the church is to the Lord Jesus Christ. We are his spokesperson. We are his ambassadors. We are his hands, his arms. And so you ask, how does a one world government system get established? It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedicated people. What do people dedicate themselves to more than anything else? Their religion. You have, sold out religious people, Islam, they're willing to blow themselves up for their religion. Wars have been started in the name of religion. And so similarly here, the church of the Antichrist is going to be that spokesperson, that ambassador. I am here on behalf of, and the power that she has is incredible. In verse 4, we actually see what her power produces, which is prosperity. Verse 4 reads, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to continually ask for money or pray about money? And, we're about, $35,000 or so away from having the money to build our building up top, and we're still working through that. The building committee had a meeting tonight. Love that they're meeting and working things out. But, here God just describes, this religious system has so much money, they're just decked with it. She's decked with purple and scarlet color, identified as more of a wealthy status, especially in the first century, decked with gold and precious stones. So not just that she's got a bracelet of a gold or something else. Oh no, she is fully decked out. So this religious system has money galore. How do you get your way with people that are not Christians? Money, right? Bribes, pay them off. You just deal with it that way. What will it take? How many zeros will it take for me to get this yes? It's not a bribe, but it's very interesting. Did you see what President Trump said the other day? That anybody that is willing to invest $1 billion or more into the U.S. economy will get fast-tracked through all of their required permits. It's not a bribe, but you're borderline right there, man. Same concept. God is revealing. With her prosperity, she's going to be able to continue in power. But then look at verse 5. We see her power of this Babylonian mother. We see her prosperity, but then we begin to see her perversions. And we've already been introduced to them. But verse 5 goes further. Upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. We'll break the name down tonight. When you see the word mystery in the Bible, it does have an idea that you're going, I'm not fully sure what this is. It's a mystery. But a mystery was something in the Bible that God did not clearly reveal, because it's something hidden, clearly reveal in the Old Testament. Well, this is one where God didn't fully reveal until the book of Revelation. Where if we didn't have the book of Revelation, we wouldn't even understand what all of this is. And so the explanation of the word mystery is just simply God saying this religious system was not revealed until we get to the book of Revelation. And it deals specifically with Babylon. So just because something wasn't revealed doesn't mean that there were not crumbs to follow in the Old Testament. We just may not have been able to connect all the dots or put all the pieces together to make it make sense, which is why it's considered a mystery. But she's known as Mystery Babylon the Great. So the mystery is tied to Babylon, the way that God described it. I want you to think with me, for sake of time we're not going to go there, but I want you to think with me concerning Babylon. The first time that we have the city of Babylon, Babylon the great city, was back in Genesis chapter 10. When you begin to read Genesis 10, it is the establishing of the nations. It's the oldest document known to man about how the peoples of the world came together. It's incredible in our Bibles. But in Genesis 10, we also have the building of the Tower of Babel, which was situated at Babylon. It is the first religious system that God reveals in His Word that is opposed to God. Hence the name Mother of Harlots. So Babylon the Great goes all the way back to the founding of the nations. The word Babel today means confusion. But in your notes, I gave you the full definition of it. The word Babel, if you break the word down, it actually means the gate of God. So this temple that was being erected in Genesis chapter 10 and Genesis chapter 11 is the Tower of God. It was man's religious system to be opposed to God. It's the first one we have in the Word where we see humanity beginning to buck God. And it's Babylon. And so God is saying, world's not changed. Every false religion can have its roots tied back to the Tower of Babel. Every one of them. When they go away from the truth of the one true living God that is revealed on the pages of His holy word, every time you can go, I can trace you back to the Tower of Babel. Now, you might not be able to say, oh, this man to this man to this man to this man. I'm not saying that tracing. But the philosophy, the style in which it is being produced, the results that it produces. So she's known as Babylon the Great. She is the mother of harlots. So every man-made religion that goes against God, you could argue, stems from this first religion. And that's why God uses that name, mother of harlots. Verse 6 says, I saw the woman drunken with the blood of saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. What does every false religion seek to do? Snuff out everyone else that's in opposition to her. Which is why we know every time somebody tries to say, oh, Christianity and the Crusades. That wasn't the one true Bible Christianity. No, we were not a part of that. That was a false religion that had taken the name of Christ and attached it to their false religion to push the atrocities that were pushed through to them. True religion seeks peace. That's why we got Jesus. True religion seeks to be peacemakers. We understand that. But here I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints. So this false religion of the end times is not happy with just snuffing out a little bit. It is her priority. And she is to be drunken with, to completely consumed with a desire to snuff anyone out that disagrees with her. Specifically, of course, God reveals it, it's Jesus. It's the followers of Christ. When I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Don't freak out about the word. Usually when we think of the word admiration, it's a positive, to admire. What John is saying here is he's astonished or he's in shock, which is the proper definition of admiration as well, just a different definition of it. Right? You can admire something not with a positive, you can admire it in a negative. You can admire a nuclear bomb but not think it's a really awesome thing, a really good thing. You can be astonished at it. You can be in shock over what it produces. And so that's what the word admiration here means. John is in shock. He's never comprehended anything like this. And so he wondered with great admiration. I have an idea. I wonder if John's mind went back to John 16, verse 2. Where Jesus said on the night of his trial and ultimately his crucifixion, they shall put you out of the synagogues. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. And I know that's a capital G, but the word God translated there is just the generic name for God. So it could also refer to others. I believe it refers to our God, but I'm just saying you could say they think they're doing their God service. The world system will purposefully snuff out every opposing opinion in service to their God. That's the Babylonian mother. That's what God reveals this religion of the end times is going to be. Her power, her prosperity, but her perversions. And how she accomplishes all of this is through coercion. It's through the death of others. It is through my way or death. That's the only options you've got. Secondly, in verses 7 through 18, we find the Babylonian monster. Beginning in verse 7, the Bible says, the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. I mentioned this earlier. There's a lot here, so we're going to break it down. But I mentioned earlier, the beast is twofold. It is the Antichrist, yes. But it is also the world system of the Antichrist. God will refer to them interchangeably throughout the book of Revelation. When we get to chapter 18, he's describing Babylon. Even though we're talking about Babylon now, that's the Babylon city, but also Babylon, the economic system. God will do this at times. The term is used interchangeably with distinction. Okay, we're talking about the Antichrist or we're talking about the world system. Distinction, but not separation. They work seamlessly together. Does that make sense? Okay. Look at these verses. We see the beast's description in verse 8. Who the beast really is, where he comes from, how he destroys ultimately even the great harlot, which is the religious system that he has established. But there are 4 thoughts that are brought out and emphasized in verse 8. We have the beast that was, is not, shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and then go into perdition. So 4 thoughts about this. Those thoughts are this. It's past history. So when you think of the beast, which is the system of the Antichrist, remember I've told you, Satan does not know when Jesus is going to return. And so Satan has always been working in governmental systems to accomplish the purposes that we're even reading about tonight. In times gone by, and I'll get to them here in a minute, and it'll make even more sense when we continue. But in times gone by tonight, or throughout our history, there have been world-domineering governmental systems. Egypt is the first of its kind that we know of. You've got, of course, Babylon itself during the time of Daniel. You have the Medo-Persian Empire. You've got Greece. You've got Rome. You've got other ones. We're going to go into them a little bit. So when God says the beast that thou sawest was, what God is telling us is, really what you're seeing isn't new. It's been around. It's past history. But then God says, and is not. And so you have a present condition. At the time that John was writing this, Rome, even though it was still a world power, was already starting to crumble and fall. And so as a world power, it really isn't anymore. Now, it's not going to fall for a lot more time, okay? Ultimately, it took a lot of time to crumble, unlike the Medo-Persian Empire or the Babylonian Empire, which fell in one night. Okay, but you could see the writing on the wall before that. Can I ask you, do you really think America is the powerhouse it used to be? It's not, is it? We have corrupted ourselves. We have begun to destroy ourselves, though the dollar is still what runs the world. So we're still the world power, but in essence we're not. And so that's what God is describing, the present condition of Rome, this world power. But then he describes a future reviving, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So this future reviving that God is going to bring, God guides us with that word bottomless pit. We talked about that It's the word for the abyss, or the place of, it's not hell. I got to be careful not using that term because God didn't use it. But it's the place where God secures certain demonic things. And we dealt with these with the trumpet judgments. Not going there. Where God holds certain spiritual beings. And so what is going to come is extremely demonic. No surprise to us. What we've read, what we've gone through in this book, no surprise to us, but that is the future reviving. If you've read books about it, you may have heard about the revived Roman Empire. There is truth to that. I don't like using that word terminology too much because it's not the Bible's terminology, but also because sometimes we think it'll be just like Rome was, but that's not necessarily the case. However, God ties Rome to it, in part because that's where John is writing. That's who's imprisoned to John when he gets this on the Isle of Patmos. And so God uses the terminology to help us understand it. But there's going to be a future reviving. So you've had world empires before. You have one that it's there, but not really. And it's going to come back one day. But then as the verse continues, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Not purgatory, but perdition. Or total destruction is what the word means. This would be its final and total destruction. So there is coming a day where this beast, these world empires that control everything, one more is going to come, but it's going into total destruction. So God reveals this is the description that we have of the beast, but then we also find its location. And this is why, verse 9 is why we tie it to Rome. Look at it with me, verse 9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. If you go back to verse 3, the same terminology. This beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. So pretty much every commentator, and I agree with them, based on history, based on biblical truth, what we see, the 7 mountains that are referred to where the beast sits. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. So there are 7 heads, those are kingdoms, but there are 7 mountains. It's a clear reference to Rome itself, which if you were just to Google it, religious sites and non-religious sites identify Rome as 7 hills or 7 mountains. They're not mountains to us, especially coming from the Rockies back in the day, but the 7 hills that are there. And why we also know that is because when you consider how the Antichrist works, you've got kingdoms, you've got nations, you've got peoples, you've got tongues, you've got multitudes that have come together. Rome was identical. Each of those 7 hills in Rome, when you study it out, was its own independent, autonomous country, if you will. Similar to the way we as states in our America work. We are independent. We are autonomous. Although really we're not anymore, right? We haven't been for forever. But that's the way it was originally designed, right? Our Constitution controls. We are affiliated with the United States. We have unioned and partnered with them, but you don't get to tell us all the things, although it's changed. However, I'm not going there. Each of those hills was like that. However, because of their proximity to one another, because of their closeness, and because they spoke the same language and they had things in common, and they would do commerce one with another, they united together to form Rome, which is why Rome was a senate back in the day, why it was more of a republic, similar to us, different, but similar in some ways, that you would have elected officials because, hey, we are our own people, but we want to work together with all these others to make sure that we're working in harmony to build something greater than what we could produce on our own. And so when God describes in verse 9, the 7 heads are 7 mountains, it's a clear reference to Rome. And that is where the woman sitteth. So in times gone by, because of this, preachers have said it is the Catholic Church, because where is the Catholic Church centered today? Rome. It is. It is where the Pope is. It is where all of their money is. You could really identify the Catholic Church. I'm not saying it would be true, but you could say, oh yeah, she's committed fornication with the inhabitants of the earth. She has slaughtered people and been made drunk with the wine of her fornications, right, and of her wrath. She is definitely decked in gold and silver and precious stones. It's the richest organization that has ever existed. You could say that. I don't agree with it. What I do believe, and this is just me, I do believe it's going to be Islam that takes over. Because Islam will ultimately win some battles that will allow them to take over Rome and take over everything over there. And they will get all the spoils and they will have all the gold and all the silver. Because even though, historically speaking, Catholicism could be identified in this way, is Catholicism currently going around slaughtering people? They're not. Middle Ages, Dark Ages, you could go back and point fingers then, but we're talking 500 years ago. They're different today. Today, done. I'll go in there. I don't even have time. Okay. So the woman is identified as that great city in verse 18. So if you jump down there, the woman which thou sawest, and again, the woman, that's the mother of harlots. That's the false religion. The woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So the Rome will be, based on what we're seeing, where the false prophet of the Antichrist's religious system will be based out of. The Antichrist himself will be based out of the Middle East, in Israel. We've seen that already. But they will work seamlessly together. So you have the beast's description. You have the beast's location. We believe it's going to be over in Rome based on what God reveals in verse 9. But then we see in verses 10 and 11 the beast's domination. There are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. I'm going to tell you, this took me a long time to wrap my brain around. And to be honest with you, I didn't get it until tonight, when God finally revealed it. And it clicked. 7 kings. The word kings is also translated kingdoms. It's not wrong to say kings, but picture not just a king, but picture a kingdom. So 5 are fallen. When John wrote this, there had been 5 world empires that had fallen fully. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. Throughout history, those 5 had fallen, and 1 is Rome. I mentioned Rome is not, and yet it is, because again, it is there, but it's not the power that it used to be, but it's still there. So it's not fully fallen yet. So 1 is. And then God says the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So there's a 7th one coming, right? So 5 have fallen, 1 is, that's 6. And the other is not yet come. There's only 7 kings. But then look at verse 11. And this is why it took me forever to wrap my brain around it. So we would say, before you get to verse 11, I'm sorry, no, I just told you to look there. When we would say, oh yeah, that's going to be the Antichrist. But then God's word says the beast that was and is not, even he is the what? The 8th. So who's the 7th? Are you confused still? Because this is what was struggling with my mind. I'm going, okay, if we've identified the Antichrist to be the 7th, how is he also the 8th? And then tonight, as I'm just was studying, thinking, contemplating, ultimately here's where God brought me. As I've studied through Revelation and got to know it deeper and more, and I've studied Daniel and Ezekiel and other passages that we've gone through. Do you remember how we've talked about how when the Antichrist comes on the scene, this is Daniel 11, he will come with very smooth words. He will come uniting with kingdoms. So, he, with other kingdoms, will become a one world empire, the 7th. Clue in on the words at the end of verse 10, short space. And then he, individually, will begin to rise power When, if you look at verse 11, and the beast that was and is not. Remember when we talked about the Antichrist? He will receive a mortal wound. He will not die, but he will receive a mortal wound. And then he is revived from it. And that's really when the false religion puts the mark of the beast in and begins to really slaughter and murder people. And it goes, remember when we talked about that? So the beast that was and is not, he becomes the eighth, and he becomes the sole power with only other people underneath him. He doesn't die, but at his death. And when he rises again, no more is he happy with, oh, the seven of us are all together. Oh no, I'm now the it. You have no power, you have no sway, you have nothing. And when you think about the last battle that we've gone through over the last couple of weeks, and you have kingdoms that are marching against the Antichrist that used to be united with him, it all clicked and made sense. So the seventh and the eighth, you could identify as the beast, as the Antichrist. But in the seventh kingdom, he is part of. In the eighth, he is the it. And that is what God reveals for us in verses 10 and 11. Once the beast, the Antichrist, establishes this conglomeration of kingdoms that he has at the beginning, the seven heads, they will soon, a short space, go away. And it's at his death. Again, he does not die. I'm using that loosely because he receives a mortal wound. And when he rises again through the power of the dragon or the power of Satan, he takes over. But look at how he takes over in verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So now the word kings is individuals, because they've not received a kingdom yet. God identified them differently. So picture this. It's the way the world has always worked, so it shouldn't take too much, hopefully. You have the Antichrist coming back to life. You have usurpers in the kingdoms that will kill or destroy or wreak havoc on that head so that a new horn can rise up out of it. And it is those usurpers that work with the Antichrist. And the Antichrist gives them power. You see how verse 12 says, they're 10 kings, but they got no kingdom yet. They got no power. They're just there until the beast gives them power. And he doesn't give them power until he takes that power for himself. I know this is a lot to put our minds around. I hope you can picture it. I know I've studied it, so for me it's easier, but trying to make sure it makes sense. And it is those kings that are, they're just his puppets. But it is those kings that have taken the power from the original head and said, this is now mine. The terminology that God uses, the beast, the heads, the horns, all of that ties back to Daniel. So if you do get confused, jump back to read Daniel 8, even Daniel 7, Daniel 11, and you can kind of get a similar picture of how God describes certain things. There are times a horn will rise out of a head, and even though it's connected to the head, it's not like the head is still alive. Because it's just a description, okay? You got to look beyond the animal kingdom and go beyond to say, okay, the horn came from that kingdom, that head, but just because it came from it doesn't mean that it's a part of it. We had any Americans that hate America's guts? Even though they're from us? Same concept. Okay? So make note that these kings receive power for just 1 hour. So this is now after the midpoint of the tribulation. They've only got a short period of time before they lose their power. Or it's a determined time with the beast. These have one mind, shall give their power and strength unto the beast. That's why they're just his puppets, right? Just one mind. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. So these 10 are going to continue the battle with the false religion, not with them in the sense of negativity, but united together to fight against the saints of the end times. With one mind, they seek to control the world. The primary target is the followers of Jesus because they're the instigators of problems. They're the ones creating all the havoc, at least that's what they think. And they'll accomplish all of this during that final last part of the tribulation period when, as we studied over the last few weeks, it gets really, really rough for all of the world. Lastly, verses 16 through 18, very brief, we've got the divorce of the beast and the false prophet. All good things, whenever you have religion and government, they're going to end in destruction. The Antichrist is bent on power in and of himself. He does not want to share it with anybody. Satan has never wanted to share his power with anybody. And so we see that even here. He will use people for a purpose, only to destroy them. Verse 16, the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So the 7 kingdoms, they were good with the whore. They were good with the false religion. They were good with that. It was a symbiotic relationship. But now these horns have risen, have killed the original kingdom. They can't have the false religion anymore. And so they hate her, and they make her desolate and naked, shall eat her flesh, burn her with fire. So even though Christians are going to be attacked and persecuted in the last days, the religious zealots of the false religion are also going to be persecuted and hated, though it won't happen like us, where we're constantly attacked. There will come a day where all of a sudden they are attacked. So the gold, the silver, the scarlet, the purple, all those things that she was decked with are now gone. She's desolate. She has no money. She's hated. She's naked. She is destroyed completely. Shall eat her flesh, burn her with fire. Again, it's not a real person. It's a symbolism of a religious system, but she's gone. This divorce is going to end in massive destruction between these two. Verse 16 is so very revealing. After that honeymoon period, the false religion will become destroyed because the beast does not want to share his power with anyone. Verse 17, for God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will. This is where I wanted to get to tonight. And to agree and to give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. So who's the one doing all this? God is. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill whose will? His will, God's will. Don't you love that about our God? I don't understand all the whys. I don't understand the purposes behind it. But I do understand this. 17 is so abundantly clear. All these kings that think they're hey, we're giving our power to the beast and he's going to lead us to victory. And yeah, this is an awesome thing. God says, hey, stupid, I'm the one that's actually doing that. I'm the one that put it in your heart to give him your power. Because when he has your power, he's going to destroy the false religion for me. And then my kingdom, my Messiah, will ride back on a white horse, wiping him utterly out. And we will take over the kingdom. God did all that. And he will give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. When's it all going to take place? When God says so. Not one jot or one tittle, Jesus said, shall fall till all be established. That's our God. The marriage of the church and state is not a happy one. It started out great, only to end in misery. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, we've already looked at this, which reigneth over the kings of the whole or of the earth. Every age that has ever existed, there has been tremendous pressure on people to conform to the culture of the day, regardless of the culture. Be it a religious culture, be it a secular culture, be it a Christian culture, be it whatever. There has always been tremendous pressure to conform. It's what we even see here. Conform or die. Right? I'm going to slaughter you if you don't. I'm going to be drunk with the blood of the saints. And even to abandon what you know to be right and true for the sake of breathing room even, a little bit of comfort. It's in these last days that we will see it like no other. I think of so many throughout the centuries that have given their lives for the cause of Christ. Martyrs. It's what we see here in our passage. In America, I've mentioned this before, we've never been there. We will get there. We will be a part of this somehow. I don't know where on the world's scale we'll be when that happens, but obviously we won't be. We're going to be in heaven. But I mean, as an American country. Persecution always does a couple of things. It will drive out false. We see this in Jude. We see this even in the book of John, or 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. Drive out the false, but it will purify the true. It's in these last days that we live in. You and I don't know when Jesus is going to come. I don't know how many birth pangs, Bible words, we're going to go through before the actual birth of the tribulation period. I don't know the difficulties. I talked to Hannah downstairs tonight. She's got 11 weeks left, and she was just sitting there leaning back, holding her belly. You know, she's got 11 weeks left. Davis. And trying to wrap it up. Thanks, babe. No, you're good. You're good. All right. She's already like, I just want to be done. I don't know how far away Jesus is. But there are days I do. I look at our world and I go, I just want to be done. But take heart. Back to verse 17. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Not one more day will ever go by that God did not say, I need this day. I'm not ready yet. So keep trusting in God. Keep drawing closer to him. Keep allowing him to purify you. Keep allowing him to strengthen you. No matter what the end times looks like, our God is still on the throne. Father, thank you so much for your goodness and grace. Thank you for the privilege of your word. Help us to understand it. We went deep. A lot we covered tonight. And so God, help us to wrap our minds around these things. Bless richly, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.